Joe and Hunter Biden have found themselves in a mess of their own making. Following years of scrutiny over Hunter Biden's business dealings and the extent to which his father played a part, time is finally up and an impeachment inquiry has been called against Joe Biden. Sky News All Stars James Morrow, Piers and Kristin Tate deep dive into Joe and Hunter Biden's nightmare week and the fallout from the impeachment inquiry. Joe Biden is facing yet another speed hump in his bid to win another term in the White House. But this time it's not stumbles or gaffes, it's something much more serious that could ruin the Biden family legacy forever. Sky News All-Star Piers Morgan spoke to Fox News' Brian Kilmeade to dissect the web of allegations against Hunter and Joe Biden.
Everyone should forget about the hookers and the crack and the horrible behavior of somebody who has signs of addiction. Out of control, tons of money, was able to capitalize on it, exists way too long. You could decide on that. Put that aside. Was he going around from country to country, Kazakhstan, China, Ukraine? Yes, yes, and yes. Was he talking to the richest woman in Russia? Yes. Was he doing business with them? Yes. What was his business? It was the influence and leverage his dad had in Washington for being there since his late 20s. This guy was Vice President of the United States, former chairman of Foreign Relations when he was in the Senate. And it looked like he was queuing up to run for president. We know he would do that and win. And all people wanted to find out is, was he in fact compromised? Shouldn't you just come clean and say, like, we know Donald Trump's got a hotel in Turkey, you might not like that. He's got a building on 57th Street, you might not like that. He's got influences in Scotland, you might not like that. But we knew what we were voting for. All people wanted to know is, what were you doing with this country, and will that affect your foreign policy at all? Instead, you got denials. If you tweeted that, they'd passively suppress your social media. They destroyed the New York Post for 6 weeks, or for 2 weeks, and for quite a long time for different writers. If you brought this up or had proof and had some questions about these overseas business dealings. So now we find out the President of the United States now said I had nothing to do with it. Then he said, I knew about it. Now, yesterday, we find out, or this week we learned, that he said, my dad did not benefit financially from my business dealings. Excuse me? You are evolving this story in real time. And I think it's important for people to know before they vote, is their president compromised, and why haven't they, as he told the truth, since 2020?
Sky News All-Star Kristin Tate agreed, saying the evidence is mounting against the pair.
But there is evidence that Joe Biden had some knowledge of his son's business affairs, and there's certainly evidence that Hunter Biden was trading on his inside running, on his connection to the big man.
Of course, and the mountain of evidence is exactly why the impeachment inquiry was adopted by the House today and formalized. The evidence is just piling up by the day, but this is the only thing that Hunter Biden and the Biden family can do, is try to appeal to the emotions of low information voters and hope that people don't actually learn about that evidence. But let's just go over some of the biggest facts here. If we want to talk about evidence, we know that Joe Biden spoke directly with Hunter Biden's business associates at least 22 times. We know that Biden family members and Biden-linked business entities raked in more than $15 million in cash from individuals in Ukraine, Russia, Romania, and China. And we know that Joe Biden received direct monthly payments from Hunter Biden's business bank account, which had received funds from Chinese-linked entities. I mean, no evidence. Give me a break. This is just so corrupt, and I'm glad to see the impeachment inquiry moving forward.
However, the Democrats seem to be living in denial, says Sky News All-Star James Morrow.
Now, in doing this, of course, the New York Times was following the lead of Democrats on Capitol Hill who were getting all the talking points out there, including claims the whole impeachment inquiry was based on zero evidence.
They have no evidence, of course, to support this inquiry, but since this majority never lets facts get in the way of a good set of Fox News talking points, here we are.
They also made the claim that this is somehow just about, Hunter's drug addiction being used against the president, who is a man of decency and integrity, if you don't mind.
And Republicans are weaponizing this addiction and using it to attack President Biden, a man of decency and integrity. Frankly, it's one of, if not the most despicable things I've seen in my whole career here in Congress.
Right. Of course, it's a matter of public record that the then vice president met with Hunter's associates from China, Mexico, Kazakhstan, Ukraine, and Russia, directly contradicting statements Biden made during his 2020 presidential campaign and while in office. In fact, despite what these guys are all saying, there is prima facie evidence of an influence peddling scheme, and that the president did benefit from it. The claims that this is somehow just about Hunter's addictions is also a nonsense, because if that was the case, well, wouldn't that bolster the idea that Hunter was indeed using his father's influence as a carrot to sell to foreign powers to fuel his expensive party lifestyle?
And in another act of defiance by Hunter, the president's son has refused a congressional subpoena.
He has refused to comply with a congressional subpoena. You see, Hunter doesn't want to testify in private. He says his testimony might be selectively leaked against him. He wants to instead grandstand in front of Congress and presumably make a big show that, in his head, believes will exonerate him. In this, I have a weird suspicion that Hunter, on some level, believes that he will cut a figure something along the lines of Michael Corleone in The Godfather Part 2. The criminal mastermind behind the family business, besting all the rubes in Congress and getting away with it. Of course, if you're familiar with the Godfather films, you also know that Hunter is more Fredo than Michael.
And it's not only a tattered reputation and election loss that Joe and Hunter have to be worried about. Associate Professor at Seattle University Patrick L. Schoetmer says the charges carry the potential of substantial jail time.
It's hard to tell at this point how serious the charges are, given that these charges are actually charges that are fairly rarely brought to court. They're usually pled out. They do bring a fairly substantial potential jail time, but it's going to be being heard in California and Los Angeles, which should be a fairly friendly jurisdiction for him. And even if convicted, I wouldn't expect them to be a particularly long sentence.
Hunter and Joe Biden have always maintained their innocence, refuting all allegations of interference in business dealings. Sky News All-Star Chris Kenny says Hunter Biden has succumbed to the very modern idea of perpetual victimhood, seen through his impassioned speech just last week.
Isn't this the standard line of our times? It turns out that Hunter doesn't see himself so much as sinner, but sinned against. Not the hunter, excuse the pun, but the hunted. Yet he's succumbed to the 21st century plague of claiming victimhood.
For 6 years, I have been the target of the unrelenting Trump attack machine, shouting, "Where's Hunter?" Well, here's my answer. I am here. Let me state as clearly as I can. My father was not financially involved in my business, not as a practicing lawyer, not as a board member of Burisma, not in my partnership with a Chinese private businessman, not in my investments at home nor abroad, and certainly not as an artist.
Chris Kenny also said Hunter Biden's speeches are all about appealing to people's emotions rather than the facts.
Have a look here again at Hunter Biden, and it's all about appealing to people's emotions.
They displayed naked photos of me during an oversight hearing. And they have taken the light of my dad's love, for me, and presented it as darkness. They have no shame.
Oh, poor little Hunter Biden. They have no shame, he says. It's just extraordinary.
Despite the tumultuous life of Hunter Biden and everything the wayward son has put his parents through in the public eye, White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre maintains the Bidens are still very proud of their son.
The president was certainly familiar with what his son was going to say. And I think what you saw was from the heart from his son. And you've heard me say this, you've heard the president say this. When it comes to the president and the first lady, they are proud of him continuing to rebuild his life. They are proud of their son.
And even though Joe Biden is maintaining a strong public image of solidarity with his son, the public is seeing through it, with polls suggesting Joe Biden's popularity has taken a hammering, says Sky News All-Star James Morrow.
Let's get into it with my next guest. Joining me now is political journalist John Fund. John, President Biden's political standing is at its weakest point of his presidency. A new Wall Street Journal poll finds, with voters giving him his lowest job performance marks and favoring Donald Trump for the first time in a head-to-head test of the likely 2024 presidential matchup. More bad news for Biden, but can it get any worse?
It just did this morning, James. The Pew Research Center, which is one of the most respected polls in America, found Biden's popularity falling to 33%. That is down 9 points since the beginning of the year. And it's even worse among some groups. Only 61% of Democrats approve of his performance. Among blacks, it's only 52%. Among Hispanics, it is cratered at 33%. If you ask people if they have confidence in Biden on the economy, that's at 36%. If you go and ask which party do you have the most confidence in to govern the country, Republicans are taking the lead now by 5 points. This is such a disaster, and this is across so many different polls, that the prediction that you and I have talked about for weeks and months is looming ever larger. The Democratic Party has got to find a way, if it wants to remain in power, to dump Joe Biden. And if they really are lucky, dump Kamala Harris too at the same time.
Sky News contributor Joe Siracusa confirmed this, saying Joe Biden has lost the plot and knows he's finished.
Well, look, 1 in 5 Americans think they were better off with President Trump than with President Biden. That's true. They're having trouble putting groceries in their carts, paying their mortgages and their rents. Americans are just having a worse time. There's Donald Trump with his 60% rating, and there's President Biden who's going down the tube. There are no more Democrats who are going to walk on fire for this guy. He's lost the left wing of the party. He's lost a lot of the black and Latino votes. He's in bed with all the wrong people. That is, he has no control over the war in Gaza, even though he thinks he does, etc. And he's just simply sort of lost the plot, you know. And he knows he's finished. He knows his son is finished too. I mean, he's going to have a very bad ending. And of course, he has no way of getting out of this, because majority of the American people, Democrat and Republican, don't want to see him run anyway. So, I mean, Donald Trump is perfectly poised to position to win the next election. And yes, he's going to deal with President Putin and Chairman Kim, and he'll be very strong for Israel and the rest of it. So, we go back to that old formula, Pete. Trump's critics, they take him literally, but not seriously, whereas his supporters take him seriously, but not literally. He's having a little bit of fun.